as a strategic advisor, I get asked a lot of questions. I also ask a lot of questions. And I feel like over the last few weeks in particular, I have had a lot of people with very deep, thoughtful questions all about paid media and advertising, especially when it comes to paid search and social. And today, I'm hoping that we can answer a few of those big questions and get you all feeling more confident to explore how paid ads might actually fit into your strategy to grow your business or help you realize that maybe now is not actually the right time. So, welcome to the table. If you're new here, I'm Dani Henneberger, your host and the founder of Mise en Plan. And as a strategic marketing advisor, I help businesses big and small reposition their offers, rethink their strategy, and find clarity when that usual menu of marketing tactics just isn't cutting it anymore. And as a small business owner, I'm also on the same team as you, just trying to figure it all out. And over the years, I have had the privilege of collecting some of the most amazing bunch of experts in their field. And actually even started this podcast to be able to bring them to you and let them answer our big questions and get you the support that you need. And so today, I am so excited to introduce you to someone who has become such a dear friend and small biz confidant to me over the last year, Emma. Emma Huschka is the founder and CEO of Fiddle Leaf Marketing, a boutique agency helping small businesses grow through paid social, paid search, and smart digital strategy. And she is passionate about partnering with women-owned businesses and brands of any industry, and is all about bringing a transparent and results-driven approach to every single person that she works with. When she's not leading her team, Emma is a mom and of two very adorable little twos and very proud Purdue grad. So, Emma, welcome to the table.
Thank you so much for having me. What an intro, first of all. So impressive. But thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's been so much fun getting to know you over the last few months and excited to chat.
I know it's always so much fun when we get in a room together, even though we've never actually been in a room together. It feels
No,
like
sorry.
we know each other so well. In fact, just before this, we were having lots of good chats that we probably should have recorded because
I
it's
know.
small business life, right?
I'm sure we'll have plenty of
Uh,
more.
I know, I'm sure those landscapers are going to come right on by any minute. Um, well, okay, so we are on completely opposite coasts of the US right now. But before we get into ads and all the many questions that I'm going to ask you, and I cannot get the answers for, I want to set the table a little bit, literally. So if this were a dinner party, which is my vision for this whole podcast as a whole, what's the dish that you would want to bring?
Oh my goodness, what a good question. And just like you said, I'm a big question asker. So it depends how many people are there. Like hypothetically in this dinner party, like how many people are we talking, like estimate?
Ooh, let's say there's like five or six of us.
Okay,
Just the
okay.
girls hanging out with some wine. What's on the
I love
table?
it. I have a spinach dip that is it's like a warm spinach dip. It's five ingredients. I'm all about simplicity. Like you said, I'm a mom of two littles. So if I'm gonna do anything, it's gotta be it's gotta be simple and quick. And this delicious five ingredient spinach dip. I do some like Hawaiian bread alongside it, and
Ooh.
it's so good. Like I said, it's warm with the Hawaiian kind of like sweet Hawaiian bread. It's fantastic. And it's a really good kind of for that size group, even some leftovers, depending on, what else is there. But yeah, I think I'd go with a spinach dip.
Oh, that sounds so good. I'm gonna
You're
need
like,
the
no, I
recipe
need it.
from you, please. Because
So
I
good.
have a spinach artichoke dip that I love to make, but I always do it with like tortilla chips. So I've never done it with warm potato bread, and who
Mhm,
doesn't love some good warm potato bread? So okay.
mhm, mhm.
Well, you're welcome to come to my dinner
Oh,
party
you're
anytime.
invited. This is actually a vetting process.
Yeah, this is actually what this is. That's the whole purpose of this is to find out who I'm willing to invite. All
Yeah, it's some
right. Well,
people say things you're like, no, thank you. Actually, we'll have to pass.
yeah, you can't eat everyone's food. Um, but not my friends. They're all great and have the
Everyone's
best food.
welcome.
So I'm excited. One day I'm gonna make it happen.
Yes.
All right. Well, as I mentioned, I've been getting so many questions recently about paid ads and what people need to be thinking about. And I've gotten a couple of questions that I know I've had some answers to myself, but I thought, wait a minute, why don't I bring in someone who is actually a pro and is actually under the hood more often than I certainly am with whether it's Meta or search or what have you. Um, and I would love to get some thoughts from you on what your answers would be. And hopefully the people that have been asking me these questions are listening in. And so we all have the answers now. So the first one, and I know you and I have touched on this before together, which is, when is it the right time to start doing paid ads? I think there are so many businesses that are in the state of growth. Some people start the minute that they launch their business. Some people have been in business for 10 years and are going on 7 or even 8 figures and haven't even touched paid ads before. So aside from time,
Yeah.
what is the right time in
Yeah.
giant quotation
Yeah.
marks for those of you that are listening, not watching, to start using paid ads?
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I love your quotes on time because you're spot on. Is like, unfortunately, just like anything with marketing, there is no perfect science or perfect answer. But some things that I definitely, even from a agency perspective, that I proactively will reach out to brands that I'm like, you kind of check these internal boxes that I have that I think you'd be a good fit for paid. So like that's kind of where I want to start with this question is what that foundation looks like for paid ads of what we like to see when it comes, either a brand comes to us or we're going to proactively reach out because we think it'd be a good opportunity. And I'd say, some of the things that we look for is like, how is your messaging? Which, again, we've talked about because that's obviously your
Mm,
expertise and where you thrive of like, do you know how you're presenting your service, your offer, your product, and how you're communicating that and who your audience is. Like those are, I think very foundational pieces that you want to make sure you have down because paid ads is really fantastic of magnifying whatever is existing. And
mm,
if you don't have that messaging down, hey, we can get whatever messaging is there in front of a lot of qualified customers. But if you aren't able to convince someone of why your product or service matters, paid ads unfortunately aren't going to make that possible if your business, your website isn't already doing that. So I'd say that's a big one. Another one that I think is a good kind of am I ready checkbox is, how are you doing organically? And like you said,
mhm.
there's businesses that have grown for 7, 10, if not longer years and have never touched paid ads. And they've just been able to do really well and maintain a growth and maintain a business off of organic. And that's a really good sign if you've been able to do that well and grow, I'd say really at all organically is a positive sign because right there, that means you have a message that's resonating because you're doing something organically. So, not that it takes that many years, I think if you, and that's where it's tough, just like you said, to say whether or not right out the gate it makes sense or, to give it some time. There's no perfect formula, but, you feel good and that you have a consistent message that can convert customers. In that you've been able to do something organically. And again, unfortunately, I can't quantify that something, but that
Mhm.
you've seen some sort of traction. And I think lastly, which I think we're going to talk a little bit more about the investment financially, but that you do got to have funds to put behind paid ads, period. It's paid. It's a critical portion of that. It does take an investment and I think it's important to look at it as an investment and so whether or not you're going to hire a professional or kind of try to do it yourself it still takes dollars and you have to have something to put into that. So I would say the messaging, some sort of organic traction and money, some sort of investment.
I know this is on my list as well for much later on, but I'm going to bring it in now, which is the burning question that I think most people have, which is how much do I really need to spend in order for paid ads to work?
Yeah, no, that is the question. And I get this, probably every single client, potential customer I talk to. And again, no perfect science. In some of the like statements, I think that are fact pretty much, or like the more you put in, typically the more you get out. These are multi-billion-dollar companies, Meta, Google being two of the largest. So typically the more money you put into them, the more you're going to get in front of, more customers, the more data you're going to get. These paid advertising platforms are completely off of machine learning and data. So the more you spend, the more data you get. The quicker you get that data, typically the better the results because they can learn faster.
Mm.
So there's, again, kind of just some truths that have to be stated. But the biggest thing I talk to, especially small businesses about, is you have to start somewhere. You can't get to, that growth or that scaling stage, which is our, pride and joy. And when we get to a client, we just posted a case study this week of like a client that we started working with, and now we're scaling because we were able to, show a proof of concept of like ads work. And now we continue to increase budget because the results are there for that client. And the more you spend, again, typically the more you make. So all that to say, kind of my best practice, and these numbers are arbitrary because we don't have a magic ball that's like, if you spend this, you get this. That would be fantastic. I wouldn't be doing this. I'd just be creating e-commerce businesses. But, if I had to say a number, I'd say $1,000 a month on ad spend on, Meta or on Google, or, ideally both, is what is, kind of the magic number to start. Uh,
Mm.
there's some agencies that won't work with clients unless they're spending that because it is kind of a little threshold that, kind of looked at across the industry. And then my recommendation is if you're going to invest in paid advertising, that at least kind of the minimum I'd recommend is $500 a month. So that 500 to 1,000 is starting point. The closer to 1,000, the better. And of course, if you have the funds to, invest more than that, or, start there and then see what you get and then push further, is what I recommend if, again, kind of throwing out numbers.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of those things, right? That's a little bit gambly where,
100%.
you just kind of have to put some money. I gotta
Mhm.
spend money to make money. And that's, I think, one of the hardest pills to swallow when you're
Absolutely.
starting a business is
Mhm.
where that investment goes and then whether or not that is bringing back
Yeah.
tangible return,
Mhm.
given obviously they're really hard-earned dollars, especially hard-earned dollars the earlier you are in
Absolutely.
your business. But even if you're in 7, 8 figures, it's
Still important.
still hard-earned money. So
Yeah.
how do you think about ROI
Mm.
and how to know whether or not your ads are getting you
Yeah.
the right amount of ROI?
Yeah. And it's such a big question, and it's for each customer, each week, each quarter is different, and depending on what their goals are. But just like you said, and why I love what I do is like I understand all of that, especially now as a business owner. I've been in the industry working with small businesses for almost 8 years, and so I've worked a lot of small businesses that I just like you said, I know how important every dollar is, and how
Mm.
you've got to stretch, you've got to see a return to continue to invest, just like any investment. If you're not seeing a return on your investment, it is a risk, it's a gamble. There's other places you could put that. If you don't see that return, you're not going to keep doing it. That's just, that's the way it works. But as far as, what is what's worth it, or what's, a good return on your investment, return on your ad spend, is such a good question. And I think that is a lot where we start with our clients, of that conversation of like, a lot of our clients, when we ask like, what are your return on ad spend goals? No idea. They've never done it before. How would they don't know.
Mm.
They want to make money, but they have, the intricacies of what goes into that is just pretty convoluted. And even the data around that, there's all these sources of truth that are going to tell you one thing versus something else. So we kind of walk clients through that in the beginning, and we really dive into like their profit margins, for their services or their products, to help them kind of
Mm.
reverse engineer what's a positive return on ad spend for you at this point in your business, which might look different day one versus 90 days in, versus maybe 6 to 12 months. And so what that comes down to is like, there's so much that goes into that return of, if you're looking at it strictly from the ad spend perspective, it's going to look probably pretty dang good. Once you start to take into the expense of providing that product or service, you obviously then are looking more at your margins and then how it's impacting your bottom line. And some clients don't realize, when you decide to do paid ads, all of that needs to be part of the conversation. Because yes, if the top of the, your revenue is increasing, that's fantastic. But if you're producing more, providing more services, then your expenses are also going to increase. So, there's this big conversation of profit that, some agencies will just say like, this is your return on ad spend. Look how glorious it is. And it's like, there's so much more that goes into that, and whether or not it's positive for a business or not. And we don't shy away from those conversations. It's so
Mhm.
important because if You could have a 20x return on ad spend in a platform that if you're spending a couple $100s, that's not as impressive as if you're spending a few $1,000s and you have a 4x return. Um, there's just so much more that goes into that. So I don't think that probably answers your question just because it is so complicated. But and again, I think it just comes down to the bottom line. Like, are you making more money? Are you making more profit? Then it's probably successful. But not to just judge it based off of that return on ad spend because there's just so many things, additional pieces that go into that to make it that simple.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that I know I've worked with some clients whose customer acquisition cost average in the 300 plus, right?
Mhm,
Because
mhm.
it's much more high ticket item, take
Yeah,
a little longer to
absolutely.
warm them up, spend a lot more to follow them around the internet, whereas others might be able to do it for a couple of dollars.
Mhm.
And it just really it depends on who you are and what you need and what you're going for and the life cycle of
Mhm.
your business.
Yep.
So that's a really great point. And you did say something really interesting about how sometimes it matters like what month it is, like what time of year it is and all of
Mhm.
that. And so I'm curious, should ads, and this is a question I get a lot, which is should ads always be on? Or
Mhm.
does it make more sense to strategically turn them on, turn them off, depending on when you know you're going to
Yeah.
get a better ROI?
Absolutely. And such a good question. Again, one that I get often too. And I would say, like, a straight answer is yes, should always be an always on approach, period. I am an advertiser, so I am going to be biased towards that answer. But to follow that up of the data and why, and it comes back to data, like I already mentioned a few times, these uh, businesses use machine learning to optimize and to be efficient to get you the best results. It takes data and they use positive reinforcement. So if you want to get someone to buy your product, you want to get someone to book your service, the more that those things happen, the more positive reinforcement goes back to these platforms, the more they know how to do their job of finding those people. So the more data is always going to be better, period.
Mm,
So if you're stopping ads, for example, in Q1, very common for people to think that after Q4, whatever, seasonality obviously different with businesses, but especially in e-commerce, Q4 is like the time. There's advertisers. I was just talking to clients earlier today. The competition right now and through the rest of the year is going to be the highest that it will be all year because there's advertisers that don't advertise all year that come into the space right now or especially increasing budgets. And again, what we really recommend to our clients and anyone that is considering paid ads is even if you pull back budget significantly, in your off seasons, the stopping, turning off campaigns, you basically reset all of the learning that you had. You don't lose it. There's still data, that exists out there, but you are turning it off. You have a valve and you're shutting it off versus keeping it on, ramping it up during, yeah, your push seasons and then pulling back maybe during your slow seasons is you're still keeping that learning going rather than, again, most of these campaigns, Google and Meta, once you turn them off, pause them, you reset that learning and it absolutely impacts performance. So even if you have what we refer to like an evergreen approach and have something to even help with brand awareness, whatever it may be, maybe branded campaigns on search, kind of pull back to like your minimum to keep them always on, even at a minimum, the bare minimum you can handle from ad spend is better than stopping for a lot of reasons, but a lot of it is data. And the other argument I talk to my clients about too is since so many advertisers are defaulting to stopping during those times, that's exactly when you want to be advertising. When you want to be advertising, it's cheaper, and your competitors then are maybe not in the space. So of course, then you want to be because if they're thinking, I need this or I'm looking for this, you want to be the one that's getting in front of them. And if you also go dark, then like, they're not going to find you, or maybe your competitor. But so yeah, there's a variety of reasons, but ideally you're always on is recommended for sure.
that is really fair. I never like I understood that, but I never really thought about it as being a part of consistently feeding the algorithm. And I think it's a lot of like what's behind being consistent on organic
Yeah.
social is that the algorithm forgets how you
Hmm.
fit into it, and then it doesn't know how to get you out there anymore.
Yep.
I say this as if I'm very regular and consistent posting on social media, but we're going to pretend like I am. Um,
But
those of
you
us,
know how the
yeah,
algorithms work. It's
yeah.
you have to play the game for it to reward you. And
Mhm.
it's the same. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then I know that similarly to different times of year being big times of year for just the market in general, there are also sometimes big times of year where it's big for you. And I know that some of my clients, for example, are going through launches or are trying to build their email list and or are trying to put on a big sale or are trying to actually sell something. And so when it comes to running ads, do you find that paid ads are more effective for positioning something as like a freebie or a free offer versus like a paid offer or a low cost offer? So I guess, can you talk a little bit about where like paid fits in the strategy for each of
Yeah.
those and like filling the top of funnel versus, throughout the funnel? I know
Mhm.
that's a really big answer, so
Yeah,
feel
no,
free
it's like,
to like
okay, let's well,
finger
I'll
puppet
start
it a
with
little bit.
no,
Yeah.
that was they're all really awesome questions. So as far as like a paid offer versus a free offer is such a good question and a fantastic test. Is like it just so depends on so many,
Mhm.
what the offer is, what the business is, and how much, data maybe you have, if you have any, of like how well does your free, offer do to convert? How often, if we get you these free,
Mhm.
X, like us, we have our free strategy call. And it's like, once we get them on the phone, we feel pretty good about our conversion rate. We're good at selling, and that's ultimately what it is. So it's, if you're freebie, whatever kind of your want to be able to offer to get someone's foot in the door, which is a fantastic sales tactic, um, to show the value, a low cost, obviously, probably to the business. Then it's worth testing. Absolutely, yes. But I am definitely, we're hesitant to ever recommend our clients offer something for free unless of course they, it's their idea, they want to do that. Or if we're really struggling, whatever their price point, especially if they're new, to kind of that proof of concept to get people to spend X amount on whatever. Because it's, again, ultimately, especially if you're offering, willing to give something away for free, that's such a personal to the business of whether or not that makes sense.
Mhm.
So it's, there's just a lot, again, that goes into that. But I think testing is what we always are going to default to. Like, let's give it a try. Let's see. And then as far as the funnel, just like you said, there is, when you're prospecting, when you're, trying to get in front of potential new customers, a lot of that is getting their foot in the door, like whatever, that's a conversation, that's a trial, that's a sample product, a discount to buy your product, to at least fall in love with it. And then, especially customers maybe that tell, or clients that say they have a high lifetime value. So they're, once people come the first time, they just,
Keep them coming back.
a lot
Yeah.
of loyalty. It's like, perfect. We just need to get them to try it that first time. And then it might lead to conversations like, oh, have you considered a 10% off your first purchase? Because clearly you have no issues getting them to stay loyal and come back. We just need a really good, campaign to have them keep you top of mind. So that way, when they do fall in love, a competitor doesn't turn their heads, and swoop in. So kind of keep them in that funnel. And of course, email marketing really helps with that. Paid ads support it. So yeah, I think, in nurturing that funnel, getting them kind of I'm not a fisher woman, but like hook and sinker, you really got to
Mm,
hook them with that kind of top of funnel, and then continue to work them down the funnel, either by offers, kind of additional incentive. We do that through like reviews, case studies, ways that you can, it's like, okay, now you're interested. If that didn't do it, here's more information. And then typically
mhm.
promo, we do a little bit lower in the funnel. Just because, again, we don't always recommend discounting your product the first time someone discovers you, and then they're maybe going to expect that. So anyways, that was a lot, but there's all sorts of ways, depending on the business, the offer, that we can kind of tie that in,
Yeah.
work customers down the funnel in a way that will get them to convert and ideally continue converting.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, it like really depends on the business and what your offer
Mhm.
actually is, because the higher price point to your offer, the harder it is to just like cold sell something, right? So how do you
Absolutely. Yep.
warm them up along the way and get them
Yep.
in the door so you can really start pitching them via email versus if you're selling deodorant, just making up something. Like if you're selling deodorant, like
Yeah.
that's a little
Yeah.
bit less of a cognitive
Yep.
load to
Yep.
want to purchase. And therefore, you know, this is where strategy comes in and really
Yep.
understanding who you're selling to and what you're doing. And so
Mhm.
like that's what matters. And sometimes it also comes down to like the type of creative you're doing. And so I'm so
Mhm.
curious because
Absolutely.
I feel like creative is one of those things that has is polar opposite today than it was
Mm.
5 years ago, let
Mhm.
alone 10 years ago, let
Yeah.
alone, oh my God, go back and like watch Mad Men. And like that worked back then and none of that works
Yeah.
now.
Right.
So when it comes to the type of creative that works for paid ads, whether search or social or whichever lens you want to cover this, um, what works best right now? Like, what are the big trends that you're seeing on that front?
Yeah, I love, I mean, this is creative is king is kind of like the phrase in the industry right now. Content is king, creative is king. And it's been like that, especially with again, machine learning here over the last couple of years, few years, just like you said, so different. Then I think I think it's easier, but at the same time, a lot harder than, of course, I wasn't marketing back, like you said, in the Mad Men days, but I almost wish like we have so much data now that I think, it gets a little convoluted, but it does, really come down to creative anymore, especially on Meta, search. There's elements. YouTube's been huge. Small plug for YouTube. YouTube's like, depending on what list you look at, like second or first used widely used social media app. Technically a Google product, so it's under the search umbrella, but it's just becoming more and more popular. YouTube Shorts specifically, and the type of content that resonates on these different platforms varies slightly, but what it really comes down to of what's working really well and has, at least for the last few years, is user generated content or anything that remotely resembles that. So, real people, people are resonating the most right now with real people, and whether or not that's user generated content by customers of the business, employees that are, customers, actors, if you will, because it's not always, there's all sorts of ideas to get creative when, not all businesses can get their customers create content for them. That's, the holy grail if you have that. But, either what we'll call actors, oftentimes employees. Founder videos are huge. I think probably every single one of my clients have been asked for a founder video if they're at least open to getting in front of the camera. Because again, it's people want to buy from people. They want to connect with people. I think post-pandemic, this has been, probably just true in general, but especially with advertising. Advertising's been so big over the last decade, if you will. And people are so used to tuning out ads and scrolling right by it that you have to stand out. And a lot of ways that's, which is kind of ironic and hilarious, but is to be organic and feeling and, making it seem like it's not a paid ad, and making it seem like it's organic. So organic feeling content is really doing well. And then I'd say, depending on where in the funnel and what type of ads, but product ads for e-commerce businesses. So dynamic product ads are huge on Meta, that products dynamically populate into the ad based on the customer, and then Google Shopping, still kind of product images. So I'd say anything organic, user generated, and then product focused, is in product feed based. And same thing, testing is always going to be just continuing to test and iterate and change out content.
Absolutely. And social proof, which is that user-generated content and the reviews and the testimonials and all of that cannot be understated how important that is. I did a whole episode on it. I'll drop it in the thing. Um, but it really is so important, especially in a world where we don't really know what's real anymore. And it's so easy to be targeted something and be told you need it. And so being able to have that sort of connection
Yeah.
with the company, but also feel like it's a bit of a like I don't want to necessarily call it tribalism, but feeling safe because other people have already done it and being able to see the
Absolutely.
proof of that is just so important. And if you're going to get it in front of as many people as possible where they've never heard of you before,
Mhm.
to get that trust component of that know,
Yep.
like, and trust
Yep.
early on is priceless.
Absolutely. And
So
that social proof, just like you said, and especially with social media being such a huge part of people's daily lives, is that proof that of concept that other people have bought this. I'm not going to get, like you said, trust, and I'm not going to get, scammed, and it's, it's legit, all those things. Spot on.
mhm, absolutely. And I know, you mentioned we started this off by talking about how ads look very different
Mhm.
now than they did before. So I'm curious if you have any insights, because I know, for example, like lookalike audiences are no longer a thing. And so what are some of the other like secret tidbits happening under the hood of that might be happening under the hood of people's set it and forget it ads on
Mhm.
Meta or on Google or wherever that they should be aware of
Mhm.
that's changing. Maybe it's like a functionality component or even just like a trend.
Yeah. Ooh. I would say, you nailed one of them. The audience targeting on Meta has been 180 over the last few years. Interest-based targeting was huge before. Those are a thing in the past. Meta's, is kind of slowly burying them, probably, in time getting rid of them entirely. Look-like audiences, very similarly, it's broad targeting, and back to the creative conversation. That's why is basically Meta's machine learning, and similarly on Google, it's just done so differently that I'm going to kind of stick with this train of thought on Meta,
Mhm.
is that basically Meta knows better who your audience is than you do based off all the data that it has on its customers, which, is creepy.
Back
It's
to
all
the algorithm.
yeah, but it's effective.
Yeah.
And when people hear that, they're like, "Ew," it's a gross feeling. It is. But it's 2025, and data privacy is another podcast. But still, even with privacy and transparency that Apple's implemented in policies around that, they still have more data based on how you're interacting on their apps and outside of it still. So basically, the new strategy that works very well and is a big shift to your point is having different ad types, different messaging, different value propositions that in a broad audience that then the ads speak to who your customer, may or
Mhm.
may is and who the different people are. And then the ads find the people in your audience rather than you telling, this is my audience, here's the ads I want to serve them. It's like, here's different ads, different ways of presenting who our brand is, and then those ads find the customers. So it's kind of a reverse engineer of what it used to be. And it's again, just makes creative that much more important, and your messaging that much more important, and testing that much more important. And a lot of clients we work with, in the beginning, we'll talk like a little bit about their target demographic so we can understand like who they think it is or who they want it to be. But again, a lot of it's that these platforms are really good at finding customers that you may not have otherwise gained because of this, broad targeting approach. And then on, search, a big thing that's been performance max campaigns have kind of been the big trend on Google, and it's been a pretty big black box as far as like what's happening with those. And it's similar idea where they're using data and machine learning and kind of lumping it into this performance
Mhm.
campaign type. And but actually it's kind of an interesting shift on Google's end that they're actually revealing more data around performance max campaigns here in literally like recent weeks and months, in allowing advertisers to see more of that, kind of pulling back the veil, if you will. So there's, I'd say that in and of itself, just the changes. Meta, is there's still constant changes on these platforms, but I'd say that's probably even a bigger one for anyone that's maybe just set it and forget it on a search campaign,
Yeah.
especially performance max. Is it's the goal is to basically to have ads run on all of Google's, same kind of thing as Meta, all of Google's kind of inventory of ad placements, and kind of give it a bunch of combination of things and just like, all right, take all this and do what you will. But again, it was a black box, but they're now kind of allowing more transparency around what's going into that, and across the industry, you're seeing advertisers that are kind of peeking under the hood of performance ads campaigns and seeing things that like, ooh, this actually, isn't it. It's all going to like these cheap these cheap placements that maybe just don't do as well. So again, I'm getting probably a little too nerdy on this, but all
I love
pieces that these platforms do change and evolve, and unless you're actively invested in it and in an expert, they can waste your money, pretty quickly, or, leverage it and take advantage of it and make money. So yeah, there's a
Yes.
couple of the trends I think we're seeing, even as of recent weeks with search.
I mean, absolutely. And I think you really nailed it on the head there at the end, which is there's a lot of stuff that's moving all the time. And if you have your stuff on set it and forget it, and it's just kind of like, I do $5 a day or whatever it is that you're doing, I think that there are, there's especially one place where when I'm working with clients, I'm like, if you're going to do it, have someone who knows what they're doing do it. And paid ads are that. I think that it's can be extremely technical. It's like kind of like professional gambling in a way, but you have to be able to do it in an informed way. You don't just show up to a blackjack table and not understand the rules and just keep putting 20 down and hoping that, you hit 25, but that's not actually what blackjack is, right? You're trying to hit 25, but it's 21, so you keep
Yeah.
losing. And so knowing and having someone that you trust with your investment, it's kind of like having a stockbroker,
Mhm.
honestly,
Yeah.
help you go and make these decisions for you so that you, as a really busy business owner who has way too many hats on already, like you can't afford to waste that money. Um, and so this was not meant to be a statement about a plug of working with Emma, but definitely work with Emma. But this is, I mean, it's the truth. And I think that there's so much that moves and happens, and the algorithm is constantly shifting that to just trust somebody to keep on top of it for you is so invaluable. And so, Emma, tell me a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you and learn more about working with, if they don't already, with a professional manager of paid ads and paid advertising and
Yeah.
digital
Yeah.
strategy.
No, I appreciate that. And I just do want to say, everything, like you said, outside of being a paid, an agency that of course is going to be biased to having someone, run your ads for you. But even as an agency, I've been in these platforms for, again, coming on a decade, 8 years since they've evolved and been what they are. And even as an advertiser that spends most of my day in there, there's times each account changes. Different accounts will have access to different things. So I'll get in and I'm like, what
Mm.
happened? Like, what is this? There's not this like big announcement to anyone that advertises, like, we moved this, we changed this. It's actually quite the opposite. There's so little, updates from these. They'll provide their side of it. It's all PR, and so I just can't agree more, even as an advertiser, how frustrating it is of, these changes. It's, usually sometimes for the best. But it's hard to keep up with, even doing it for a living, let alone, like you said, trying to run your business and be the expert, on what you're offering. So um, but as far as, getting a hold of us, we are active on Instagram, post a lot of like small business tips, paid ads, but also just in general, because we just greatly care about small businesses. Like you said, we really passionate about women, mom-owned businesses as a woman and mom-owned business owner. And then we do, as I already mentioned earlier, our free offer is a strategy call to, either do an audit if we absolutely, that's actually our favorite, if there's any paid ads that are being run, like we'll audit it and we'll be very transparent and either say like, here's opportunities for growth, or like, you know what, you got this pretty dialed in. Like we typically will find something just because, it's what we do. But if it genuinely could, maybe they're doing pretty dang well on their own, we'll tell them that and be like, we're here if you want to take it kind of to that next level. Oftentimes, or even if they're working with another agency that maybe, that's usually what it is clients that are working with an agency that, there's a lot of agencies out there. We look at ourselves as performance marketers that, like I said, we're going to check your margins and actually making you money versus, here's a bunch of people we can reach, which is some agencies' approach of like, you're reaching millions of people. It's like, cool. How many people are of those people are converting? Um, so yeah, we'll set up a strategy call, audit your existing ads if there are any, give you feedback on, what's working, what's not, and get kind of data behind it. Or if you have an unpaid ads, then, talk through of like, here's what we can do from, what we learned about your business. Walk you through what could look like. Obviously, talk about pricing, working with an agency. And yes, you can either go to our website, schedule that free strategy call. I also just love, anyone just following along on Instagram. Again, we want to help small businesses, whether or not it's, resources like this of just information, or of course, in an active management perspective. We have various packages. We have some that kind of just set up campaigns for clients, kind of done for you. So teach them enough to, if the budget's not there for an agency, to set it up and teach them enough to be dangerous, is what I like to say. Or, of course, active management, and then ranges of what that can look like, starting out versus kind of that scale stage. So yeah.
Amazing. Well, Emma, thank you. I will make sure that all of your contact information is put in the show notes. And then if you want to hear more from Emma, I know Emma and I had a great conversation on her podcast, all about marketers, marketing, and how it is quite the experience. So I'll make sure to add that to the show notes too if you want to check that out. But Emma is incredible, an incredible human, incredible marketer, and I am so grateful to have her in my network. And so please feel free to DM me, DM her if you have any questions about marketing. If you have a topic you want to cover in a future episode, let me know. Let's make it happen. That's what I'm here for. So I will also be getting that recipe from Emma. So DM us if you want to get the recipe for her spinach dip, which I feel like I need now. Um, but I'm so glad you joined us here today on the table, and I'm going to save you a seat. So make sure you tune in next time.
Thank you so much for having me, Dani. I really enjoyed it. We'll talk next time.
Thank you. Bye bye.